There we go. Got it. So today we're here with Simon Pearce, the filmmaker behind Officer Down. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
So let's get on to the questions.
Sure.
Describe yourself in 3 fictional characters.
Yeah, so that's quite a tough one. It's a good question. I asked some friends for some help with that, and there were some universal answers. So the 3 that came back were, well, Tom Holland's Peter Parker, albeit without any superpowers, Foggy Nelson from Daredevil, and Benji Dunn from the Mission Impossible movies. So I guess the theme there is sort of maybe well-meaning but a bit dorky. So I'll take those.
What were your earliest memories of film and filmmaking?
So I was kind of introduced to it. So both my parents were freelancers in the industry. So my mum is a makeup artist, my dad's a camera operator. And I remember he went off to work on one of the early James Bond films, Goldeneye, and he showed me The Living Daylights because it was the only one we had on tape as a kind of example of this is the kind of thing I'm going to go and do. And that kind of really hooked me, and I was like, oh wow, I loved obviously the kind of action and adventure, and that's one of the things that sort of first got me into film. And then filmmaking came about. I think I was only like maybe 10 or 11, and we had a Hi8 sort of family video camera, and one day I was just bored with a friend, and we thought, well, let's just make a movie. So we just made up a story on the spot. It was like 10 minutes long, all shot in camera, no editing or anything, and I just loved it. It was just something about the process that, coming up with the shots, where we were going to put the camera. I just loved all of it. So it became a regular thing then that I'd get together with friends and, make, well, as I said, we never scripted anything early on. It was just making it up on the day. Usually it resulted in some sort of fight sequence because we all loved action movies. But yeah, that's what got me into it. And then so from that age, really, I just knew this is what I want to do.
Who are the filmmakers that you look up to?
So I would say definitely, so Paul Greengrass is a filmmaker I love. I think he has a really cool, like raw, sort of visceral style. The stuff he does is, feels very real and kind of it's quite hard hitting and gritty. And Born Supremacy, which was his first Born, is one of the films that, I constantly use as a kind of benchmark in my head. Also Peter Berg, who shoots in a similar way, who did Lone Survivor, Patriots Day. And then also a couple of recent examples. So Justin Lin, who's currently doing the sort of Fast and Furious franchise, I think he's a brilliant action filmmaker, and he's got a great eye for kind of set pieces. And then also Christopher McQuarrie as well, who's done the last couple of Mission Impossible movies. I think he's a great practical filmmaker. And just whenever I've heard him speak, he's very candid in interviews about his process and how he figures things out. And he's very honest about things he struggles with.
How would you describe your directorial style and how did you find it?
That's an interesting one. Yeah. So I guess my style, I would maybe say, is still evolving, but I definitely am drawn more towards, as you could probably tell from some of the filmmakers I mentioned, that kind of gritty way of filmmaking that's a bit verite. I do like handheld. I know that can be a cliche these days, and there's a lot of films I think that do it badly, where it's too shaky and fast cut and you can't tell what's going on. But there is definitely something about that kind of style I like. And so I would definitely say I kind of veer towards that kind of thing. It was funny, actually. I was on set recently for a production I was editing that I'm not directing. I was editing it. And most of it was shot, on sort of tracks or cranes, lots of very beautiful dolly shots, really nicely lit. It looked great. And then I happened to walk on set one day when they were doing a kind of handheld sequence. And it was, there was some real close-up shots of the actors being very intense, and straight away I kind of found myself leaning in closer to the monitor. So I thought, yeah, that just kind of shows that I'm definitely drawn to that kind of stuff. So I would definitely say that is perhaps more my style, but it's definitely evolving from film to film.
How did the story of Officer Down come about?
Yeah, so that came about. I've always been a massive fan of the action thriller genre, so I definitely wanted to do something to hopefully showcase what I can do in that genre. And I was keen to do something with Martin Delaney, who's the lead actor that I've worked with on a film before, but we hadn't worked together for years. And again, action is something he wanted to sort of try out. So originally it just started as, what film could I do with him? And so we came up with the idea of this policeman trapped in some sort of kind of situation. But it took me a while, I think, to find, I felt like it needed something else. It couldn't just be that, because obviously as much as I wanted to do the action and the chase and that kind of stuff, I also wanted to have a bit more going on. And then it was beginning of 2019, I kind of looking at basically the state of, the UK and a lot of other countries around the world, and, which in many places is still the case. Just that idea of kind of these very disparate groups where kind of miscommunication comes into play a lot, I think, where one, group doesn't necessarily understand the other or take the time to understand the other, and how that can lead to conflict. And so whilst I wasn't necessarily trying to make a movie with a particular message in that sense, I felt like those themes and those ideas kind of gave the movie what, to that point, it had sort of been missing. So I worked very closely with Tommy Draper, who was the co-writer, to sort of put that together. And I had another friend, Chris Marshfield, who gave me a few sort of pointers. And yeah, that to me kind of really helped the story take shape and just gave it something, as I said, beyond just the action sequences. So there was kind of a bit more going on.
What was your writing process for Officer Down? What were the main areas of research that you had to do for the script?
Yeah, so initially, as I said, it just kind of started with me discussing ideas with Martin and then going away and thinking about what sort of situation could I put him in. And I wasn't, I'm always more drawn towards films in that genre where the hero is more of an everyman, he's not superhuman, or he's not particularly strong or anything like that. And so I wanted someone who was very vulnerable. And so again, it's, well, what situation can I find to put someone like that in? So the idea of this young police officer came up. And then it was, I approached Tommy Draper again, who a mutual friend put me in touch with. And we sort of bounced more ideas back and forth. So that's how the first draft sort of came about. And certainly I was very conscious about it feeling very real. So I actually had a good friend, Matthew Cron, who's actually a detective in the police, who gave me some advice on some of the dialogue and, perhaps what some of the procedures might be in certain situations. So that helped me shape it as well. And then Shane Askam from Forces to Film, who provided our arm response unit, and he was also our armourer for the movie. He again he's ex-military, so he kind of helped help those sequences sort of feel more real, and gave me a few pointers which we added into the script. What
were your influences for Officer Down? Were there any specific films or characters that
so I think definitely so there's two sort of Peter Berg movies, The Kingdom and Patriots Day, which I kind of referenced a lot just sort of in my head as I was writing it. So again, those kind of films that are quite gritty, are quite real. Obviously, actually a big one as well was the film 71 with Jack O'Connell. That's a really good sort of thriller set in Ireland, and that was definitely a reference. And then of course Gareth Evans' The Raid, I would say, is a reference just from the style of some of the action, which came about from my collaboration with Neil, which we'll talk about. But so I'd say that those were some titles definitely that were in my head as I was writing it.
How did you do the casting for Officer Down?
So that was, so Martin obviously was on board before we wrote it, which was nice because it was really nice. Obviously, anytime you can write with a particular kind of face in mind and you can sort of write for their voice. And then the other people, so Ben Turner, who plays the sort of central antagonist, that was a suggestion of my producer, Emily Haig. So she recommended him. She'd worked with him before, and I saw him in a film, 6 Days, which is on Netflix, action movie about the Iranian embassy siege, SAS embassy siege. He was fantastic in that. So I kind of, from the get-go, was like, yeah, that guy would be great if he'll do it, which thankfully he did, and he was incredible. And he also helped really shape, there's a sort of central dialogue scene in the movie between him and the police officer when he has him sort of hostage. And he really helped shape that, actually, and really kind of gave it an extra layer, which is incredible. And then Joseph Altin, who played Amir, he actually came back quite late in the day. Martin had initially suggested him, and thankfully we sent his agent the script and he loved it, which was fantastic. So he actually only came on board about 3 days before we started filming. It was sort of that close to the wire. So I'd never met him before. Likewise, Ben, I hadn't met him before he came on set, but they were both incredible, and it was very much an honor to work with those three guys.
With the character of Alex, what did you want to explore? How did you work through this characterization with Martin Delaney?
So that was, as I said, I definitely wanted it to be a kind of everyman thing where he wasn't just, superhuman or anything like that. The idea of him being a sort of young, quite nervous police officer, and, I wanted it to be someone who finds their strength, because the idea of being outnumbered and trapped in a situation like that is not something they're I guess trained for, and that he's in the police, but not something he ever kind of expected to find himself in, and he's definitely caught off guard. But then also somebody who I think initially, just through sort of fear, is not necessarily receptive to what exactly is going on and why exactly he might have been sent after these people. And so that's something he comes to learn as the film goes on, and maybe they're not all as bad as each other, and maybe there's a reason that he hasn't sort of been able to understand before as to why they might be doing what they're doing. And so it was really key to kind of show that as much as he's kind of scared and it's about his own survival, also showing that he kind of comes to understand a bit more about who these people are. And so that was really important to us. And it was great sort of talking that over with Martin and working that out as we, expanded the script, but then also on set with the other characters as well. I think he did an amazing job with it.
There were very strong themes in Officer Down. What does standing, fighting and surviving mean to you?
Yeah, so that idea, it's kind of a sort of double meaning, because obviously it's very much not only just about his survival in the literal sense of getting out of there in one piece, but also it's just that idea about having, standing by your beliefs essentially, and having something that you believe in and something specific that you are fighting for. And I think, the young police officer, Martin's character, goes into this situation not necessarily having that. He's just been sent in there by orders. He doesn't have anything particular that he is doing other than, you've been told to get this guy that we have a picture of, go and do it. I think it's him being forced to confront, what do I actually stand for and what is it I want to fight for, beyond just, getting out of this place alive.
Can you talk about your experience of working on production? What was your experience on the first day on set versus the last day on set? And were there any particularly challenging days?
Yeah, so it was interesting because we actually had, so it was all set in one location, and we actually had 2 locations prior to that, which both fell through, unfortunately, because they were abandoned buildings in central London, and developers just snapped them up and basically put a halt to any filming going on there. So we were really struggling for a while to find the right place. And each time we found a place, I went, this is it. We're never going to find anywhere like this again. So then when it fell through, I was mortified. But then thankfully we landed on there was this warehouse in Lewisham where we ended up shooting. But the trouble with that is that by that point, it was approaching the end of 2019. And of course, ideally for filming, because of weather and light, you want to shoot kind of, July, August, September, summer, and also for temperature. And so there was a time where we thought we might actually push the film into 2020, which thankfully, because of course everything that happened there, we didn't do, because then it might not have happened at all. But it did mean that it was then early December by the time we started filming. And so we only really had light in that building between the hours of, I would say, 9 and sort of 3:30. So obviously your shooting days, which might normally be 12 hours on a film, are basically cut in half. So that made it challenging. It was also cold. There was no lift in there. So we were a low budget shoot, so we couldn't necessarily afford all the sort of mod cons you might ideally have. I mean, all the crew were troopers and did an amazing job with that. So yeah, as much as it was a 5-day shoot, though my producer Emily likes to say you basically did it in 2.5 days actually, when you think about the time that you had. So I'll go with that. So yeah, I think light was the biggest challenge and just getting it done quickly. In terms of the most challenging days, I think the first day was good fun. We basically spent the whole day shooting a foot chase that opens the movie, which in classic filmmaking style took most of the day, but of course plays out in about 30 seconds on screen. And that was probably one of the toughest, because we are working on multiple floors of the same building, because the chase basically takes you all the way to the top floor. So it was a lot of moving crew and equipment every few shots, whereas everything else in the film is fairly self-contained. We'd get into an area and then we'd stay there for most of the day. And then the last day, by comparison, was probably one of the smoothest, because that was when we filmed the central fight sequence, and that was the thing we'd rehearsed the most. So we knew exactly where we wanted to put the camera, what the actions were. And again, it was taking place in a small area, so we weren't having to constantly move people and equipment around. So that was probably one of the smoothest. And then I'd say 2 other quite challenging days. One I was particularly nervous about was there's a central dialogue scene with Ben Turner and Martin Delaney, and well, Joseph Alton's there as well. So it was the most cast, and it was like 8 pages of dialogue. And I was really nervous about that, again, just because of time, but thankfully, because those actors are such pros and did such an amazing job, it actually went pretty well, I would say. And then prior to that, we had a day where we filmed the climactic shootout. And that, again, I think was a day where, because we were shooting across multiple areas of the building, that took time. And again, it's so quick on screen, but it probably took some of the most time to film. And I remember after lunch, we had about an hour and a half left, as I said, because come sort of 3:30, 4 o'clock, it's pitch black in there. And I had to sort of quickly sit down and figure out, okay, how am I going to cut what's left effectively in half in order to make the schedule. But I think the good thing is overall with the film is that I feel that the story and all the character stuff we hit, and then the only thing we had to reduce slightly was some of the action beats. But ultimately it's like, well, story and character is the more important thing. So the fact that we got all that is great. And then, some of the action we had to skip, I can do that for another movie, so that's fine.
What was your process of collaboration with Neil Chapelhow and Joe Golby for the action and stunts in the film?
So Joe, Golby I'd worked with before on a couple of things. So he came in and he helped put together the opening foot chase. And what was great as well is getting to work with a couple of his regular guys. So Joel Grizzle and also Yannick Ganti, who appears a couple of times in the film. They were both there. There's also a new guy I'd not worked before, Corey Ryan, who was brilliant. So yeah, it was great working with Joe on that because we've got quite a nice shorthand, I think. And Joe's very good at just, understanding what you want and sort of adapting to it kind of as he needs to. He's very easygoing. It's fantastic and very professional, obviously, as well. And then Neil, I'd worked with Neil very briefly before, but we'd never done action on this scale before. And I really wanted to do it because, Neil and I got on as friends and I think saw eye to eye a lot when it comes to action and stuff. So I was really excited to do it for the first time. And it was a great experience. And as I mentioned, the central fight scene in the film is probably one of the things we rehearsed the most. So we spent about 3 days spread over several months when people were available, just working in a gym, working out exactly what that fight scene was going to be, what the moves were, where the camera was going to go. And Neil was great throughout that process. And then also on set as well, he did some shots on B camera. And again, just very professional, really knows his stuff, can adapt quickly if we have to change anything. He was also really helpful in the edit, just giving me little tips when it came to editing the fight scene of just, how you can maybe speed ramp just a few frames, before a punch, that kind of thing, to make it look even better, which was really, really cool. And the stunt guys on that did a great job as well. So Martin did a phenomenal job himself, but certainly Adi and Miguel, the two stuntmen, they hadn't had a chance to rehearse as much as Martin had. So Adi, in fact, had not done any of it before getting to set because he hadn't been available. So we'd been rehearsing with other people. And so he had to pick that all up on the day and he just got it like that and was fantastic. Yeah, the process of collaboration with both those guys was awesome. And
what do you hope that audiences take away from watching your film?
Well, I think, hopefully it's, I principally got into movie making, to entertain. Those are the films I respond to. So first and foremost, I hope, it's an entertaining thrill ride. I hope it keeps people a little bit tense, edge of their seats, and that, they love the action. But at the same time, yeah, I think with the story we're telling, it would be nice if it kind of made people think a bit as well, because there are some very kind of current sort of political undertones in there. And again, just that sort of message, I mentioned earlier about sort of standing by your beliefs. And as much as it's about that, it's also about, making sure those beliefs are kind of informed and that you kind of fully understand each side of an argument or take the time to understand, where certain people are coming from, which I think doesn't necessarily happen all the time these days. So yeah, I'd like to think, that maybe they take a little bit of that as well. And just that idea that, it was a cool action movie, but there was something interesting going on beyond that as well.
And lastly, how has your experience been with Fighting Spirit Film Festival?
It was amazing. It was, I'd actually been a couple of times just as an attendee before. And it was, first of all, I thought it was fantastic that there was a festival for, the action genre and for these types of films, because I feel like sometimes, I don't know, they can be kind of looked down on or, and there's lots of film festivals out there for horror, for sci-fi, but action kind of didn't really have an outlet. And, obviously there's so much going on within that genre, beyond just the action sequences or fight scenes. So it's so cool that Fighting Spirit exists and kind of promotes those movies. And it was really nice to come back and actually have a film on show. And the fact that, you guys were able to put on the festival basically during this pandemic, but obviously safely and following all the guidelines was awesome. So to actually see the film on the big, it was the first time I'd seen the film on a big screen and with an audience, which previously I hadn't been able to do because a lot of stuff's online now. So it was really, really cool. And then on top of that, we got the audience award for the film, which was amazing because ultimately that's who you make a film for. So to have them react like that was great. And
now time for the speed round. What is your favorite cult classic film?
I'm going to go some vintage John Woo for that. I'll say Hard Boiled.
What is your favorite 80s film?
That's probably going to have to be Die Hard, I think.
What film do you think has the best soundtrack?
That's a tough one. I'm going to use a modern example. I'm going to say Into the Spider-Verse, both the soundtrack and the score.
What is one film you could watch for the rest of your life?
Wow, that's so tough. I'm going to say, because it's very fun and easy watching and it's got great action, Fast Five.
And lastly, what film are you looking forward to watching this year?
Clue is in the last answer, which is Fast 9, 100%.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hope you have a great day.